Welcome to our first panel session of the day on our second stage, Shifts in Storytelling, Dystopian Narratives versus Optimistic Storytelling. Today's panel will share their collective cross-sector experience to unpack if it's easier to engage audiences with dystopia than with hope. Our chair is Marya Bangee, Senior Advisor at the Pop Culture Collaborative, looking at the entertainment industry investment strategies there. Previously, Marya was Vice President of Rise at the Walt Disney Studios. In that role, Marya worked as a creative thought partner with the studios under the Disney umbrella, including Marvel, Lucas, Pixar, 20th Century and Searchlight, and telling culturally representative stories seen by literally billions of people globally. Her team was responsible for furthering representation across the studios through content advisement, market strategies, creative talent programs, and Launchpad, which is an incubator for diverse emerging filmmakers. Welcome to the stage, everyone. And Marya, over to you to introduce our panel.
Thank you so much. So we'll be diving into the psychological forces behind the stories we tell about the future and what that tells us about ourselves. Does dystopian storytelling foretell what's to come? And what does it take for hope-driven narratives to thrive? I'm excited to dive in with this esteemed panel. Firstly, we have Joy Gharoro-Akpojotor. Did I actually? Oh my gosh. Joy is the founder and producer of Joi Productions. In 2024, she made her debut as a writer-director with Dreamers, backed by BBC Film. The film premiered at the 75th Berlin Film Festival in 2025, earning a Teddy Award nomination for Best Feature Film. And then just 2 weeks ago, it premiered at the London Film Festival to much acclaim. So Joy, thank you for joining us at such a busy time. We also have Pinny Grylls. Penny directed the She directed the multi-award-winning feature documentary Grand Theft Hamlet and is the recipient of the 2024 BFI Channel Filmmaker Award. Pinny is currently developing Signs of Life, a romantic comedy co-created with the deaf community designed to flip storytelling norms and bring deaf comedy and culture to mainstream audiences. And then we have Dr. Patrick Kennedy-Williams, who's bringing his extensive psychological expertise as the co-director of Psychology Oxford and Climate Psychologists, an independent organization providing therapeutic support and wider consultation regarding the mental health implications of climate change. He has worked with international broadcasters such as the BBC, CNBC, Sky, CBS, DW, ITV, Channel 4, and The Today Show. And finally, we have the journalistic powerhouse that is Debbie Ramsay, editor of 5 News, the news bulletin produced by ITN, which airs weeknights on 5. She joined ITN from Channel 4 in late 2023. At a time when most TV viewing is declining, the 5 News audience grew in Debbie's first year in the role, achieving its highest viewing figures in 2024 in 6 years. She has also been instrumental in pushing forward with 5 News' strategy to grow its digital footprint and audience. Welcome to you all. All right. So today, as we mentioned, we're going to be talking about dystopian fiction and this idea of fear-driven storytelling versus hope-driven storytelling. And what I wanted to start off with is to kind of complicate this premise a little bit. There's this kind of narrative out there that dystopian fiction is really popular and it's what, audiences want. It's what's sexy. And I would actually disagree with that. And I would say, I think probably, especially coming from Disney, where so much of our storytelling, the franchises, Marvel and Pixar, are driven by happy endings and are driven by people wanting humor and love and joy, right? I think that oftentimes we tend to have these kind of self-fulfilling prophecies of like what works for audiences. But that's why we're having this conversation today, because you all are brilliant and actually work with this every single day. So I'll start with you. Sorry, I'm having the wrong question. But basically, to you, Patrick, you have called people that work in mental health hope mongers. Can you share a little bit more about that?
I mean, we are hope mongers. We are the sort of, I suppose in the in the therapy room and beyond the therapy room, we oftentimes, start working with people or communities where there's a sense of hopelessness. And, I think one of the things that we're going to touch on, hopefully, in this conversation is to differentiate between hope as essentially an active process, right, as a kind of a pathway, if you like, towards achieving something, versus hopefulness as an emotion, let's say, and trait optimism, right? So when we're talking about hope, we're not just talking about feeling hopeful, and this comes up in the climate work a lot. How can we engage in the active process of hope, despite feeling at times hopeless about what's happening around us? So yeah, as psychologists, we often carry the hope, let's say, for people when they first start working with us. So that doesn't mean we're always hopeful about what's going on around us.
And we'll be digging in more into kind of hope as an active force, right? But Debbie, so the audiences that you speak to are hard to reach, and you're growing them, as we just talked about, which is an incredible feat in this day and age of broadcast television. I'd love to hear your perspective on this question, given that it feels like the news is just getting worse and worse. Is that actually true? And how are you navigating holding that with your audiences?
I think it's really important for us to, as a news programme, to not ignore the stories that feel lighter and bring joy and bring hope. So what we do at 5 is, across an hour, really navigate that path of, we're going to tell you about some awful things that are going to happen, and we're going to kind of hold your hand through it, and we'll take you through it. But don't worry, there's other stuff in this programme as well that's going to make you feel some joy and maybe feel some hope. We do make sure that we put the focus and spotlight on good news stories as well. And by that, I don't just mean entertainment, frivolous stories, stories of redemption the audience love, that start off by somebody doing something awful, but then they see the light, or overcoming adversity, or new breakthroughs, medical breakthroughs, climate breakthroughs, and just presenting those as the good news stories, the positive news stories that they are, and not being totally sucked into too much of the darkness. But it's a real balance, because what you don't want to do is sugarcoat the world for people. So it's about getting that balance right of telling the truth, the way in which you do it. And we have a very good presenter who does guide the audience through it, and he expresses the emotions that they're feeling in real time. So if we cover a particularly grim story, he will say, that was really hard to watch, or that was really hard to listen to, wasn't it? And he really does engage with them in that way, and behave like a human being. He's not patronising them. He's not telling them what to think. He's just there with them to help guide them through today's bad news, because it does feel like there's a lot of it about.
I think you had mentioned this idea of like your host being someone that kind of holds the audience, right?
Yes.
Through the program. And I think one of the things that the research shows about fear-based storytelling versus hope-based storytelling is that fear-based storytelling actually drives disconnect and division, versus hope-based storytelling drives empathy, which ultimately drives connection. And I think what you're speaking to is a host that's empathetic, right?
Yes.
That is able to kind of model what the audience is feeling,
Yes.
and be with them in that.
And that's quite rare for it has to be genuine, because people can spot. I think sometimes you know that when you see a host who is almost faking the empathy, you can feel it and spot it a mile off. So it's really important we are authentic, and he is one of the masters of just being himself, and he's exactly the same on air as he is off air. So,
Right.
yeah.
That's incredible. And we're talking about legacy media, and Pinny, you are really kind of groundbreaking in the work that you're doing. Your stories are really driven by hope, but you're going to where audiences are in kind of the new media space. We're going to start by actually looking at your award-winning film, Grand Theft Hamlet, and then I'll go to you for a question.
Go. Let's do it now. Okay. We are putting on a production of Hamlet in GTA Online for the first time ever. We are looking for actors, so come and audition. Please try to stop us. You can't stop our motherfucker. Oh. They got me. Oh my god, they're really coming down now, look.
To be or not to be? That is the question.
You're welcome to audition if you want. You're crazy, no?
Okay, don't shoot us, please.
This is nowhere in the mind of some of the things that others of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of trouble.
No one's gonna come.
No one cares.
It's not a real thing.
It's real to me.
Oh, hang on.
Someone's here.
Whoa.
Hi. That's quite an entrance.
You can call me Shah.
I'm Jen. I'm Tilly.
I'm Defoe. My name's Gareth.
While you're doing your dance, we've tried saying to be or not to be, that is the question.
Look, my lord, it comes.
It's like Shakespeare on a $1 billion budget.
Cops are here.
Maybe he's a purist.
We just keep coming across these people who want to help us. That gives me hope that what we're trying to do is possible.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Grand Theft Hamlet.
Amazing. That's incredible. So I think the type of storytelling that you're doing is where we're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, and you're really kind of leading the way. So can you share a little bit more about meeting audiences where they are and what you're trying to accomplish to the stories that you're telling?
I have teenage children. I know. Look at and they spend all their time on YouTube and watching mostly gaming footage of people playing games, and like laughing their pants off, like looking at stuff and having fun, watching other people play, right? And I just thought, actually, this is the environment they're in, that this is the kind of place they're in. And despite the fact that they're sort of facing, my kids had to, as many other young people, no longer at school. This was set during the pandemic when, they were watching more YouTube than ever because they were not at school and they were not with their friends. And yet I saw my child, and I had never played computer games before. My son, 12, he just absolutely loving being with his friends on games, playing Grand Theft Auto, which probably he shouldn't have done at age 12. But, and it just completely changed my mind. I think I was in a moment of desperation. I was trying to look after the family and trying to keep our mental health, on a level, and even not great, but on a level. And I saw this little, as young people do, they always give you new things. They always give you hope. And I just thought my husband, Sam, had just lost his job in a major theatre production, Harry Potter and Cursed Child. And we were looking down the barrel of the gun of like, no money, no future, and how are we ever going to do live performance again? And he just started playing computer games with my son and like engaging with his world. And then him and his friend like found this theatre inside Grand Theft Auto, and they had this idea. And I was watching this thinking, I've made loads of films about theatre and performance and things like that, but I've never made one like this. Can I make myself an avatar, having never gamed before, and like become that part of the story and start filming it? And it was so much fun. It was really hard. I didn't even know how to use a PlayStation controller. But I just feel like in moments of crisis, we were living in dystopia. It was the pandemic. And also Grand Theft Auto as a place is quite dystopian. Like it really is. Like I don't know how many people have played Grand Theft Auto here. Okay, few people confessing at the back there. But it is billions, and it is a large number of people play across the world. Yeah. And it is a place where, people have a lot of fun, and they don't just nick cars and shoot people. They have friends and they have fun. And I think that side of gaming isn't talked about enough.
I love that. I love that. All right, Joy. So your film that just came out 2 weeks ago, here at least in London, Dreamers. It is kind of it grapples with both of these things, right? It grapples with kind of a story of heartbreak, but also of hope. So, how did you thread this needle?
I think for me, it's Dreamers is sort of based in a removal center, and it's actually a story of hope, because it was loosely based on my own experience. And I remember when I was going through it, all I could think about was the hope of what comes next, and I wanted to make a film about that. So it became a love story. So I say it's a love story. It just happens to be set in a removal center, and it follows two women who meet each other. They fall in love. They have friends. They fall out of love. The usual stuff that happens is just in a place you don't expect it to happen. And for me, when people usually leave the film, they feel hopeful, regardless of how they feel about the ending. I won't spoil it, but that was the intention, was that regardless of a person's situation, you can always find hope in order to keep moving forward. Because I think the idea of the vision of what your life could be is what motivates you.
Amazing. So we're going to move into kind of some key takeaways for this audience of what people can practically do. So I'm going to go to you, Patrick, first. As a clinical psychologist, for storytellers, charities, academics in the room, what are alternative ways to frame their messaging, to tell stories in a more hopeful way?
Well, again, I think, it comes back to this idea that a story doesn't need to be positive or feel good in order to convey a hopeful message. And I think that's the key thing here is, even Margaret Atwood, for example, kind of famed dystopian author, describes dystopia as a form of hope, right? Because it's providing a roadmap for the individual to overcome subversion and discrimination, or whatever the content of the story might be. It doesn't need to have a happy ending in order to be a hopeful message. But for me, the roadmap is really important, just as it is in the therapy room. If someone comes to sit down with a psychologist, and the psychologist says, "Well, okay, I can see what your goals are, but I've no idea how you're going to get there." Where does the hope come from? And that idea, I think, transcends to the newsroom, to the producers, to the filmmakers. It's about demonstrating the steps between where we find ourselves and where we hope to be, and that is the backbone of what creates hope as an active process, rather than it having a sort of happy ending or the journey itself feeling good. So it's about creating the structure and the backbone to be able to present not just an idea, but the mechanisms through which the idea can be achieved. And we're seeing that in solutions-based journalism or and things like that as well. So that would be my key takeaway.
Amazing. Debbie, is there anything that you'd want to add to that?
I guess it's about telling stories in all their roundness. It's very rare that everything is just one thing. So bad news is just all bad news. There's always an element that you can pull out and reflect, which I think sometimes, certainly as newsmakers, we keep the focus in on one element and don't offer enough angles and sides to the story, because it somehow makes it messy. But it's really important to reflect life as it is. It always has different shades, different light and shade, and different degrees of that. It's not just black and white. So it's really important that when we are telling stories, we are telling all sides of those stories, or as many sides of that story as we can, rather than just crafting it into this perfect form of bad news. It's much more nuanced than that, and we need to reflect everyday life and give people and show people that it's okay to be hopeful. It's okay to be laughing if something bad's happened, and that applies to lots of situations. I think there's an expectation that you should act a certain way in a situation, and life just isn't like that. You have to be honest and authentic to yourself, and that should carry through, I think, in every profession. That went a bit deeper than I was intended it to, but yeah.
No, I think it's what I'm hearing from both of you is this idea of like complicating. I think sometimes with news and with all forms of storytelling, there can be an impulse to simplify and to make things, just like really clear or black and white. And actually the nuance is where we can find like the path forward, right?
And context. Context is so important.
Right, exactly. Penny?
I just think every minute of our life we have a choice that we can make about the situation we're in. And I think what you said, Patrick, about the process, that it's, if we wake up and we have a terrible day and we think, my God, everything, and I do actually have this thing with serotonin in the morning where I just like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to cope. I've always had it since I was a child, but you have a choice, and you can, I think Debbie, you were saying about, every news situation is complicated, and I think you can. The perspective is what is important, and the humour. The humour is everything, because that gives you the engine. That's the engine to power you through a bad situation. I lost my hearing when I was 38, and I remember there being a lot of doom mongers around me who were, and I had profound hearing loss on that side and severe, moderate to severe on this side, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, what are you going to do?" And it was a bit like that, but I'm not that kind of person apart from that bit where I first wake up in the morning. And, I just thought, oh my God, I'm an ethnographer and anthropologist in my background. I was like, this is actually a chance to learn about a new culture. So I thought I'm going to learn sign language because I can meet people and talk in a new language and learn about their world, and they can teach me how to survive this. And that was the best thing I ever did. And I think, you have to go through life like that, and it was, my God, my life is so rich now because of sign language and also helpful. But yeah, so I just think you have to rise to the challenge if you can. Keep your friends around you.
Beautiful, beautiful. There's in research around kind of how do you promote empathy in storytelling, one of the kind of mental shifts that people talk about is this idea of rigid thinking to a growth mindset where you're actually curious, right? And curiosity being the opposite of fear, actually. People often say the opposite of hate and fear is love. And it's actually, no, all you have to do is make people curious. And so I love that you kind of leaned into that curiosity and that growth. It's just an incredibly inspiring experience. And we're going to end with your trailer, but I want to make sure, Joy, you have a moment to share just kind of any takeaways from your personal story or from your filmmaking.
I know, I think when we were talking about hope and dystopian narratives, like these guys were saying, it's you have to find the simplicity in life. And I think that's what we've all kind of been saying, that to kind of keep you going. And you also can't be afraid to show it for what it is. But I think it's also about how you show it and how you see it. And by that, I mean, for me, my experience, the day before I went to the Home Office, we had a party. We had it was kind of we didn't know if I was going to make it or not, but let's still have a party, guys, and not talk about what's really happening. But I think that's how we kind of survive life. We have a party, and in the film, it's quite colorful, and there are moments where you laugh. There are moments where you're should I be laughing? But we're humans and we're complex, and when you really think about it, we need laughter, we need sadness, we need love, we need everything to kind of survive. And that's something that we were trying to achieve in making a love story in this place, because I feel like people come for the love and then they leave with the what can we do about immigration? And I have no answers for that, but at least they have questions.
Yeah, it starts with curiosity. And Dreamers is coming out
December 5th in cinemas. So go watch it.
So we're going to end with a glimpse at the movie.
When we are both out, I will take you on a proper date. What will our home be like?
We will make it ours.
And we wouldn't have to hide our love.
You've applied for asylum. Why can't you be gay in Nigeria?
It's illegal.
I'm getting out of here.
The first couple of nights are the hardest. You need to keep your head down and mind your business.
I see how you look at each other. I think it's beautiful.
I need to get out of here, not fall in love.
Why can't you have both?
Stop avoiding your feelings. And listen to your hearts.
I feel like I'm losing myself in this place. I know they're going to send me back.
We can fight this.
It's not a problem!
In here, people, they come, they go. It's not easy to know anyone.
It doesn't matter why we're here, just how we live.
Keep fighting. Freedom begins in the mind. If there was another way out, would you take it? Don't give up. It's what they want.
Somewhere on the other side of this wild night, I'm thinking of you.
I was told we can take one question. All right, we have one.
I'm so glad, because I've just been thinking about this as I've been speaking. The alternative to dystopian isn't normally presented as optimism, it's presented as utopian. And I kind of had a question for Dr. Kennedy about, do you think there is a network of utopian researchers and storytellers that is an international network, but it feels like there's a lot of resistance for people in talking about utopia. We actually, we like talking about dystopia, we're comfortable talking about what dystopia is and how we understand it. Do you think there's a resistance to us thinking about utopia in terms of social constructs, what kind of world we want to live in? Not just hope, but actually modelling the future.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? When we talk about dystopia, we feel scared, and when we think about utopia, we suddenly think it's highly unrealistic and pointless. A lot of my kind of background in this comes from the climate crisis. That's, although now, a lot of the conversations we're having have expanded, of course, into AI and geopolitics and, existential crises of one form or another. And certainly in the climate space, there are, utopian narratives and storytelling have been used. I think part of the resistance is part of this idea of complacency. I think hope gets a really bad has had a really bad name and has had to be quite heavily defended as a construct, because there's this idea that hope breeds complacency, and so kind of hopeful stories or a utopian imagined future somehow doesn't allow us to connect in a serious way with the message of the day. And I think that's misguided, actually. Again, coming back to this idea of what we're actually talking about when we're describing hope. I know I've mentioned this already. In exactly the same way as a dystopian narrative creates a useful mirror through which to view current circumstances, I think we have to be able to have an imagined future, albeit a slightly sort of unrealistic utopian one. Again, in the world of climate change, mental health, one of the exercises we often have people do is to pause and design their imagined future. What for you personally are you wanting to aim towards? What does it look like? What involvement, crucially, what involvement do you have as an individual that connects to the wider? What gives you meaning, and in what way are you going to be contributing to this? this. So we do create this kind of internal sort of utopian idea, and it's compelling. And I think it comes back to your point about what functions we can use to create this kind of emotional bandwidth that allows people to occupy certain spaces of thinking outside of fear, right? And creativity is definitely one, curiosity, compassion is another, right? The C's essentially, and what all of the C's involve, an ability to have, or to be able to sort of take away some of the things that are essentially occupying all of our psychological bandwidth. When we feel a sense of scarcity, we oftentimes resort to fear, and so in that sense, I think utopian narratives have a real benefit to allow people to start not only to occupy some of these more creative, curious, and compassionate states of being, but as long as there's some sense of not only a roadmap, but of kind of individual and collective efficacy. What's my role in this? And even more importantly, what's our role in this?
And we can't create a future that we can't imagine, right? So we actually have to have a vision of what that could look like. I was told we can do one more question. This is great.
As a screenwriter myself, I struggle a lot with being someone who needs to do a bit of the Trojan horse work, as was explained before, and kind of sneak some of these messaging into like other narratives like romance or rom-coms or thrillers or whatever. But at the same time, you don't want to be so subtle that the messaging is missed in some way and that they don't come away with some of the messaging that you hope they get. So I guess my question kind of across the board is, how do you balance that need for subtlety with that want to leave someone with a lasting impact as well?
Whoever wants to.
I mean, I would say character and story first. By that, I just mean, so with Dreamers, my thing is the world isn't immigrant. It's an immigration story, ultimately. It's set where it's set. But it's a character who is learning that she has choices that she can make. And actually, her journey is more about realizing the right thing isn't always the right thing, and sometimes the wrong thing is the right thing. And that is in relation to how she navigates the system. But she does that by falling in love. And that is how it happens. So I think when it comes to Trojan Horse, and I think it's more about knowing what your character wants and how they get what they want. And if you've got that, I think audiences, as long as they have an emotional connection to who your character is and the story you're saying, I don't think you have to be as explicit in the messaging because it comes through your character anyway. So I think, if you start there, you're kind of fine.
So I'm a massive fan of kind of like 1980s blockbuster movies, right? So one of the big influences on Grand Theft Hamlet was Back to the Future. And the reason I love that film is because it's a really entertaining film that was really widely enjoyed. And basically it's about there's the big drive to the narrative, as speaking to Joy, like having a really clear narrative of like, will they or won't they achieve like getting back to the future, right? So it's like, but then within that, you have loads of philosophical stuff about, identity, time, and actually, if you really analyze what the film is about, there's so much there to unpack. Plus, obviously, ideas of kind of, who are our parents and like, how do we see them? And all these really big questions, and so I just feel like with Grand Theft Hamlet, I had a really clear narrative, which was, will they be able to put on Hamlet inside Grand Theft Auto without getting shot? So there was like, it was like, there's a question. Now, you could probably fill that in a YouTube video of about 15 minutes, but the thing that makes it a 90-minute feature film is it's about people trying to survive, and it's about people trying to, overcoming adversity and their own demons within themselves in order to, and it's about community and friendship. And so, and I do also think it's also about reality, because there's lots of different layers. There's the play within the play, Hamlet's play. So there's a lot of philosophical stuff going on there, but I'm not shoving it down your throat. My perfect audience member would be somebody who comes like they're on the edge of their seat, like really enjoying it. Oh my God, what's going to happen next? Oh my God, that's so exciting. I love these characters. They're so funny. Ha ha ha. And at the end, they sit back and they leave the theatre and they're like, that was really deep, So, this is the thing, I think you really can't shove big thoughts and feelings in people's faces. It needs to be built into the narrative and the characters. And absolute Joy's right. If you have that nailed, then everything will kind of look after itself.
One of the compliments we get from viewers is that they don't feel that we're trying to tell them what to think. And I think a lot of media does actually push that message through too much, and they underestimate the intelligence of the audience, and you should never do that. So I wouldn't worry too much about making people have to think a bit. So you don't have to get your message across with a sledgehammer, and most people will get it if you do all these things that everybody else on the panel has advised. And it's the worst thing and the biggest turn-off if your narrative and the message you are pushing feels obvious, because viewers will think that you are telling them how to think and how to feel, and they don't like that at all. So it's really not being scared to make them use their brains.
Just very quickly, I think one of the for me at least, one of the best examples of a sort of social Trojan horse that speaks to I think all of your points recently was adolescence, just from the perspective of kind of, like you said, Joy, kind of actually the messages and is character first essentially, and nothing, no ideas around modern. I know the masculinity talk is happening next door, and I'm really really gutted I'm not able to see that because it's such an interest of mine. But the message was never overtly displayed, and yet for days, weeks, and months afterwards, here we are now talking collectively and internationally about the crisis facing young men. So, I think that was just a sort of an adjunct, really, to the excellent points everyone's made.
We've done some research at the fund looking at what drives people's decision making and beliefs, meaning making, and a lot of times we overprivilege what we think is logic, our words, right? And actually, so much of the way that we make decisions is much more driven by story and emotion. And so even if we care really deeply about something, right, to have somebody experience that with us is actually much more compelling than to talk to them about it. And so that's, I think where the power of what everybody here is talking about. Please join me in thanking our panelists.